Hey everyone, my name is Lucas and I am currently outside right now. Hey everyone, as much as I don't like to admit it, Yule is kind of basically around the corner. It's approaching fast. And I am outside today, just kind of finishing up foraging for some items to make some Yule incense. So if you'd like to stick around, I'll show you how to make one, at least with the things I foraged today. All right, so we're back inside, and soon we're gonna start making our incense. But before we do that, I just want to talk a little bit about Yule and what it means to me, and all of that good, juicy nonsense that everyone skips when they're looking at the recipe blog before scrolling down to what they're actually doing. So I apologize for that. But Yule. Unfortunately, I have never really been a massive fan of Yule, and for the longest time I couldn't really figure out why. And I think one of the main reasons why I've never been able to kind of like fully celebrate it is that it happens at the same time as Christmas. I don't really enjoy Christmas. I don't have a lot of happy memories involving it. I find it somewhat problematic, and now that's not to say that if you don't celebrate, or if you do celebrate it, you shouldn't. It just, my neurodivergent brain can't seem to wrap my head around it anymore, and I think that's just kind of transferred over onto my Yule celebrations. But I don't really celebrate it, and I know that I should because it's very meaningful, especially to my Germanic heritage. So this year I'm hoping to ignite a passion for Yule and start engaging with the holiday more. And what better way to do that than by pulling in the energies of the season, and also by incorporating scent and incense into my space. So Yule. What is Yule? Well, Yule is a pagan celebration that means different things to different practitioners. Some people celebrate the old Germanic holiday as accurately as they can, praying to the Norse gods, celebrating the wild hunt, giving offerings, and celebrating family and those who have passed on in that year. Others celebrate the Winter Solstice, a time of year when the night is at its longest and the days are at their shortest. It's within this time of darkness that they often look within themselves and or dwell on the darker aspects of their personality, practice, deities, or nature itself. A lot of the times they will also incorporate the sun's return into their rituals or practices, as many people believe that on that day the sun is reborn as the days continue to get progressively longer and longer. Now, as a practitioner of two different paths that I've kind of just smooshed together, I'm going to try to incorporate both types of celebration this Yule season. I am going to lean a little bit more into my Germanic heritage, which means this is going to have a little bit more of a Nordic flair, as that kind of resonates a little bit more with me this time of year. So, let's make some incense. The first herb that I'm going to be using are some beautiful pine needles I foraged from around my neighborhood. Something intrinsically ties pine and evergreens to this time of year. They are the living embodiment of perseverance. Even through the most prolonged and harshest winter, they keep their needles and remain green. For years, they have been brought into the house during the winter as a symbolic talisman to help people make it through the long, cold nights. So, I had to incorporate them into my incense this year. I'm just cutting them up here to help release some of those beautiful oils and to release their scent within the incense. Next, we have some wormwood that I had stored in my supply. Wormwood is a fantastic herb for opening yourself up to the spiritual. For the Germanic peoples, Yule is a continuation of those energies like Samhain. At this time, elves, gods, draugr, and spirits walked the land as the veil was thin. Our ancestors could come and visit us as members of the Wild Hunt, or our female ancestors could commune with us on Moedernicht, or Mother's Night. It was a time filled with ancestors and spiritual activity. So I wanted to incorporate that to help open up that gateway and get the spiritual energy and spirit communication coming through. Here I add in some dried cranberries. Cranberries are another thing that are intrinsically tied to this time of year. They have properties of abundance, healing, rejuvenation, courage, and action. Another unique correspondence that I haven't seen anywhere else, so it might just be unique to me, is that it acts as a substitute for a very specific crimson bodily fluid. It may be the texture or the color, but for some reason I've always associated it with blood. So, the reason why I include it in this year's incense is to add a little bit of sweetness, but also to symbolize blood. During Yule, performing a blut, or blood sacrifice, was pretty common. These days, blood sacrifices have fallen out of fashion and are seen as a little bit taboo. So I incorporate this plant-based alternative to pull in some of those old traditional style energies of blood and sacrifice. Next, we have some dried sunflowers. The Winter Solstice is also a celebration of the sun. At the Winter Solstice, the wheel tips back towards the lighter half of the year. I'm adding some sunflowers in to incorporate some of those soon-to-be building solar energies. If you don't have sunflowers, you can also substitute marigold, calendula, or goldenrod, as they all have very similar solar energies. The next herb or botanical that I'm adding into my incense are sloes, or blackthorn berries. Sloes and blackthorn are often associated with the darker half of the year. They correspond with energies of protection, hardship, witchcraft, crones, and the goddess Cailleach. The myths say that winter begins when she emerges from her cave and strikes the ground with her blackthorn staff, bringing about the bitter cold. This time of year is often a time of hardship for many. The days are dark, cold, and long, but they also act as a time of reflection, a time to look at those things that might seem ugly or unpleasant. I'm adding these sloes in to act as a form of protection for the long winter ahead, to draw in those darker energies, and to connect with one of my matron deities. Next, I have some beautiful fir resin and some fir needles. Anyone who has ever had a Christmas tree knows how these smell. The scent always makes me think of this time of year, and for that reason alone, I'm adding it in. Fir has similar correspondences to pine, so it will be aiding in pulling in those energies, but mostly I'm adding it in just for me. I'm putting it into the mortar and pestle and grinding it up, but I'm leaving the pieces quite large, as that's kind of the way I like it. I like a chunky incense. If you look at the needles, you might notice that some of them are discolored. Now, this is for a reason. Some of them have been foraged from this year, and the rest were saved from last year's decorations. I kept them so I could use them in an incense this year. I did it to show the progression of time and the years cycling, one year ending and another beginning. Lastly is some lovely cedar.
Cedar has strong associations with Odin, the Germanic god of Yule. Now is as much his time as it is the Cailleach's. In the days of old, feasts were held in his honor, sacrifices made to him, and prayers made for a good year ahead. He would also lead the wild hunt across Midgard. Fallen warriors, elves, and gods hunted and tracked across the realms. So, I want to honor and call his energies in at this time that is so sacred to him. But another reason I'm adding in cedar to my incense is a much more practical reason. My practice is one of a hedge rider. I metaphorically cross the hedge from one side to the other, and all around my neighborhood are cedar hedges. They encompass the entire block of houses that I live in. I'm adding them in to pull in those energies of the boundary, the powers between the worlds, and to open myself up to the spiritualness of the season. Now all that's left is to give it a good stir and put it in a nice airtight container.
Now, everything is all packaged up and it's ready to go. And if you're making this along with me this year, there's a few different ways you can go about using this. The first tried and true method is to grab yourself a good old-fashioned charcoal disc. Looks like this. And you just kind of light it up and you sprinkle it on top. If you are going to be using this method, I would suggest grinding up your incense a little bit smaller than I did. But unfortunately, this isn't really my preferred method, as I find it releases a lot of smoke and very quickly and can sometimes make your space a little acrid. So it's not actually the one I prefer, but if that's your go-to standard, by all means continue to use it. The second method, which is actually the method that I prefer, is to grab yourself one of these. It's just a little wax or oil warmer, and all you do is place some of your incense on top, and then you light a tea light and you place it underneath, and it helps to warm everything up, release all of the natural oils, and then very slowly burn it off without generating too much smoke. There is also an alternate method to using that that's very similar to the one that I just shared, and I learned actually that one from Miss Joy Morris here online on YouTube. It's basically the same thing, except for what you do is you put a little bit of wax or beeswax in the top. It basically does the same thing, but it doesn't actually burn the incense, it more cooks it and releases the scent into the air, which is actually perfect for those people who live in apartment buildings or with relatives that can't really handle smoke. Lastly enough, if you're fortunate enough, which I am unfortunately not, you can use it on an actual fire. So if this year you are burning yourself a Yule log, you could gather up some of your incense, sprinkle that onto your flames, and sit there and enjoy the beautiful scent of your working. Well, that's all for this video. I'm so glad that you decided to watch this. Let me know down in the comments below if you decided to make this along with me this year. If not, no worries, you don't have to. But if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can also leave those down below in the comments. If you like this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up. I would really appreciate you. If you would like to progress a little bit more with this pagan specifically, think about subscribing, as it really helps me out. All right, guys, happy Yule. I hope it's magical for you, and I hope you can just spend time with your family and have a good holiday. And as always, may your path always be an interesting one, as there's nothing worse than being bored. Have a good night, guys, and happy Yule.